Hi, everybody. Let me share my screen and we will get started. Okay, welcome to our lecture on adults and sexuality. I'm your instructor, Chris. Just a quick trigger warning today, we're going to be bringing up topics like abortion, reproductive rights, forced sterilization, our current presidential administration, um, as a heads up. So let's get started. This week's special topic is mental health and trauma-informed care, and here's an outline of what we'll be talking about today. So, when thinking of common life stages adults go through, we can use our imagination to explore how each of those stages might impact sexuality. How might having kids or not having kids affect sexuality? What does menopause do to desire for sex? What do life stressors like making rent do to sexuality? How might professional pressure to behave a certain way affect sexuality? There are endless ways that sexuality is impacted by adulthood. So let's zoom in a little more about specific scenarios adults might face that would require our help as HPs. Most diagnoses you're going to treat can impact sexuality, so let's go over the most common and how they relate to sexuality. Heart disease can impact it by making sexual activity uncomfortable or difficult. Things like fatigue, shortness of breath, chest pain, and decreased stamina. Medications might impact libido. Concerns about heart attacks during sex can also cause fear and emotional barriers, putting strain on relationships. Cancer treatments like surgery, chemotherapy, radiation can cause physical and emotional changes that impact sexual function, body image, and mental health. Issues like fatigue, pain, erectile dysfunction, and changes in libido or body image can all affect sex. For those undergoing hormone therapy, treatments may induce menopause or hormonal imbalances, complicating sexual health further, especially for non-binary or trans individuals. Emotional challenges like anxiety or fear of recurrence can also affect desire and intimacy, while changes in fertility can add concerns about future family planning. Lastly, diabetes can impact sexuality through nerve damage, leading to reduced sensation, difficulty achieving orgasm, or erectile dysfunction in men, or vaginal dryness in women. Hormonal imbalances and physiological stress from managing diabetes can decrease sexual desire, while medications may also affect sexual function. These challenges often strain relationships and mental health, understandably, requiring a lot of awareness and support to help these patients and their sexual health. So it can be satisfying and effective for them. Historical and political context. Staying up to date and informed about your state's policies surrounding reproductive health and trans and non-binary healthcare is especially challenging under our current presidential administration, as proclamations and legal moves are made at the federal level, yet how they impact people on the community level, let alone the state level, can be really ambiguous. As health professionals, we need to pay attention to how it is affecting the institutions we work in and how we can best support our clients' mental and physical health. Watching state level policies surrounding reproductive health, which includes abortion access, contraception, sexual education, and prenatal care, is really important. Um, since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, many people no longer have access to safe legal abortions, which, as we know, disproportionately affects marginalized groups. This can increase health risks and deepen existing disparities. Additionally, the legacy of forced sterilization, rooted in eugenic and discriminatory ideologies, still affect communities that were targeted, leading to a understandable mistrust in our healthcare system. Additionally, trans and non-binary healthcare includes not only access to gender-affirming care like top surgery, but whether someone is even comfortable getting medical care in the first place due to medical trauma or provider negligence. As healthcare providers, being trauma informed and offering accessible, reliable information is essential for healing and addressing the ongoing impacts of these policies. Um, a major player in US culture as it relates to sexuality currently is the Make America Great Again movement. As we've all seen, it generally supports traditional views on gender, marriage, and family, emphasizing opposition to expanded LGBTQ plus rights and advocating for conservative, pro-life stances. It also tends to resist woke culture and favors conservative approaches to sexual education and gender issues. Another big thing in our culture is the Me Too movement, and while it's fading from the public eye, it still has visible after effects in our culture. It has prompted greater awareness, conversations, and calls for accountability regarding consent, boundaries, and power differentials. However, this is currently being challenged with several people in positions of power in our government having been accused of sexual assault and still being able to hold their positions of power. So we're going to need to observe what cultural ripple effect Washington's current stance will have in other professional sectors, including healthcare. We all recognize, lastly, media, we all recognize how platforms like Instagram can impact self-esteem, how celebrities influence the expression of sexuality, and how portrayals of sex and romance in movies shape cultural norms. So I want to encourage you all to reflect on the sexual representation in the last like 5 movies or shows you've watched. Do you follow anyone on social media with different gender expression identities or sexual orientations than you? Um, Diversifying your media consumption will make you a more informed, empathetic healthcare professional and better equipped to work with clients of diverse sexualities. So keep an eye on that if you're not already doing that. Just want to make sure. Cool. Oh, sorry about that. That was an accident. Doo. Okay, sorry. Another cultural, oh my gosh, not opponent, component is the Black Lives Matter movement. While BLM primarily concentrates on issues related to racial justice, it indirectly intersects with sexuality. There's an article written by Tatiana King. She's a Black writer, graduate student studying sex therapy, sex blogger. She also has a website that advocates for sexual and mental health. She identifies the intersection between sexuality and the BLM movement well in her work. She talks about how Black women often lack positive representations of their sexuality, which are typically limited to harmful stereotypes. And she advocates for embracing Black sexuality and liberating it, and asserting the importance of sexual freedom, self-agency, and rejecting the societal suppression of Black sexuality, um, linking sexual liberation to the broader BLM movement, which calls for recognition of Black people's holistic experience beyond pain and like simple survival. So if you're interested, look into her work. Barriers identified in the literature include disability-centric care, where health providers focus solely on disability and neglect the client's sexual health. This often happens because the providers believe that they have like quote unquote more important concerns to address. Another barrier is lack of training and knowledge, where clinicians avoid discussing sexuality because they feel unprepared, even though, as we talk about, addressing it doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. Personal discomfort, often rooted in cultural or religious beliefs, also makes some providers hesitant to address sexuality. So let's take 5 to 10 minutes to pause and answer these questions. So pause here. Thank you for pausing and taking the time to reflect. if you realize you haven't really talked about sexuality much in your adult life, I encourage you to find people you can trust to practice these discussions with, like a friend you're comfortable with. I also encourage you to expose yourself more to whatever kind of person is making you feel uncomfortable, if that is true for you. So I really mean that. If you just put in a couple of cumulative hours exposing yourself, it can prevent you from accidentally offending or harming a client in real life. If you want help finding resources, I'm here for you. And also, if you find a cool resource that's helped increase your comfort levels, please share it with the class or email it to me. So, how does disability impact adult sexuality? It's like such a big topic, but being in a relationship with a disability involves the same elements as any other person in a relationship. But unfortunately, societal and cultural systems are built for able-bodied people, making it harder for disabled individuals. They lack representation in media, accessible sex ed, and face stigma and bias when dating. Disability can change relationship dynamics, requiring more communication and adjustments to sexual practices and physical support like positioning. While the internet provides some resources, access is limited and the accuracy of information is uncertain, leaving it on the individual to find. Additionally, disabled people often face limited body autonomy and barriers in accessing sexual health resources, such as the impact of restricted abortion access, which can pose life-threatening risks for some. This week, special topic mental health and trauma-informed care, because both have a very powerful impact on sexuality and how we should treat it. Mental health challenges can affect everything from sexual function to self-esteem, making it harder to communicate boundaries or desires. This can increase the risk of harmful sexual experiences or even assault. By fostering open, educational conversations, health professionals can help reduce these risks and empower clients. Unfortunately, stigma still leads to biased care. For example, maybe someone with a severe mental illness, like assuming that someone with a severe mental illness isn't sexually active, so they don't get access to contraception or education about safe sex, which really undermines the person's autonomy. LGBTQIA+ individuals also face elevated mental health struggles, often due to societal trauma, not their identity. So let's go into trauma. Most of you know what trauma is, but to ensure we have a shared understanding, I just wanted to put this here because you never know what professions are going to be in our class. Feel free to pause. There are also different types of trauma. Not all are listed here, but some I wanted to highlight. Structural trauma. An example of this related to sexuality might be the Tuskegee syphilis study, which involved deliberately infecting Black men with syphilis without their consent for observation purposes, which further fueled mistrust in medical professionals within communities of color. Sexual violence is a common example of interpersonal trauma. For someone with a history of sexual trauma or mistreatment, the idea of a physical exam or even a discussion about sensitive areas or topics may be extremely challenging due to fear or of a trauma response. In our book, Ellison Unko's chapter on trauma, chapter 9, they discuss the decades of marginalization and targeted violence against LGBT individuals, the trauma of seeking medical care as a queer person or a person of color, and the trauma endured by having to maintain traditional gender roles and expectations. So I encourage you to read it. This might lead a person to internalizing messages about their value, believing that they aren't worthy of joy, and causing intrapersonal trauma. Trauma is very prevalent, as you guys know, with 70% of adults having experienced at least one traumatic experience. There's also a direct correlation between trauma and physical health conditions such as diabetes, COPD, heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure. And as we've covered, many of these conditions impact sexuality. Essentially, more people than not experience trauma, so we should all be learning how to provide trauma-informed care if you're not already. Unfortunately, sexual assault is also a common cause of trauma and is notoriously underreported. Not only does sexual assault negatively impact sexuality, it's incredibly costly. Recent estimates put the lifetime cost of rape at $122,461 per survivor, including medical cost, lost productivity, criminal justice activities, and other costs. And, using our intersectional approach, it makes you think about what if a person doesn't have the means to pay for care or doesn't have access to quality therapy, lawyers? What do you do if you have a disability, um, or you aren't even cognizant of your sexual healing post-assault, because you don't have access to those resources? What does that do to a person's overall health and well-being? So, what is our role? Trauma-informed care. So, trauma-informed care recognizes the widespread impact of trauma and emphasizes creating an environment that fosters safety, trust, and collaboration for our clients. It acknowledges the prevalence of trauma among patients and seeks to understand how it might affect their physical and mental health. This care model emphasizes sensitivity, validation, and empowerment, aiming to avoid re-traumatization and support the client in their healing process. The key principles of trauma-informed care, TIC, are valuable tools for addressing sexuality with clients. Number one, safety, ensuring both physical and emotional safety by fostering a trustworthy environment, such as asking for consent before any physical touch. Trustworthiness and transparency, building trust with clear communication, consistent actions, and maintaining boundaries like orienting clients to the session or the space you're in. Peer support, encourage empowerment through connections, such as referring clients to support groups. Collaboration and mutuality, work with clients by valuing their input and shared decision making, like asking about their past experiences and preferences. Empowerment, voice, and choice means supporting clients' autonomy by offering choices like where they sit or what the session is going to focus on. Cultural, historical, and gender issues. This means acknowledging and respecting cultural and gender differences and avoiding assumptions about terms or identities, like what you call certain body parts. TIC strategies can be simple or require practice, so I encourage you to further pursue self-education through the course resources and all of our relevant texts. Lastly, I just want to say sexuality is not only an activity of daily living worth being addressed, but when clients engage in sex, it can be an act of healing. Positive sexual experiences are linked to benefits like reduced substance use, lower depression, higher self-esteem, and better community involvement. They are also associated with a lower risk of psychiatric illnesses, depression, and suicide. Additionally, sexual activity can reduce stress, enhance self-esteem, and improve body image. Communication about sexual preferences and boundaries can improve relationship quality and increase contraceptive use. Sexual identity development also boosts self-esteem and empowerment in youth, which is so cool. Sexuality is a key factor in well-being and can even aid in healing. For example, cancer patients, despite their health struggles, often consider sex a major aspect of their lives and a highly important part of their lives. Sexual engagement can promote mental and physical health and wellness, and addressing sexuality should be a part of every care plan because of all of those facts I just threw down. So, Here's lecture is over. Here is some resources for you. We have the YouTube series called Queer Sex Ed. Is that on here? Is this the right thing? Huh. Maybe it's the wrong thing. Check out these resources. If you're an audio podcast person, there's a podcast episode interviewing um, sexual assault and trauma expert on healing from sexual violence and being trauma informed and having like trauma informed media for movies and TV. Um, we also have this video on disability justice and transformative justice, both really good topics that we don't have time for today. Explore them as you wish. Thank you so much for showing up today. You did it. You rock. I'm proud of you. Lots of resources. So if you want to nerd out, check those out. Thank you so much for your time and have a good night. Bye.